So welcome back to the Backlog Podcast with me, David Gumley, Managing Director at ADAPTOVATE. I'm really excited to be joined today by Charlie Ross, founder of Triangulate Knowledge, a global expert network firm that helps organisations tap into the right insights at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie, your career has been built around connecting decision makers to world-class expertise. And therefore you've become a trusted voice in how knowledge flows, how companies form opinions, and how leaders make smarter choices. So, Charlie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
Charlie, you founded Triangulate Knowledge back in 2020 as Australia's first expert network, and you've built something genuinely differentiated. In a space that has predominantly been dominated by global firms.
Yep.
Where do you see the biggest white space in the Australian market at the moment in regards to primary research and, over the last few years, what's sort of caused clients to sort of think about, research and deeper diving into insights?
Yeah, sure. Without a doubt, the biggest white space for me is the corporate market. Obviously we serve a multitude of different client types, but there's still a real chance to grab corporate clients and give them access to this idea of accessing experts and getting genuine insights to solve real problems. We've done that a lot already, and some super interesting case studies of how to solve, a hydrocarbon tank full of oxygen, which is not a great thing. It tends to be a bit explosive. Through to how to optimize a process using AI and refine pinch points in a factory production line. So there's so much for that to do, and there's a real opportunity there. In terms of just broadly, people are going deeper and wanting to learn more. They in times of uncertainty, they definitely sort of turn the lens inward, and outwards, frankly, but need to learn as to what the risk sort of profile is, and by speaking to people, they can do that.
And so you mentioned corporates. Mm-hmm. Is that because those organisations haven't realised they could access this sort of level of expertise,
Sure.
which has predominantly been, geared towards investors, private equity, listed equities, etc.?
You bet. Yep, that's right. They just don't know it exists, and there's been a huge competitive advantage for, say, private equity when they're looking at, a bolt-on or acquiring a business. Bolt-on is acquiring a business, but that they've been able to drill in and do X number of calls with people around the industry and the company to learn and get that information. And now the corporate universe should be doing the same.
So in simple terms, can you just sort of explain how, if as a corporate, how I would access a so-called expert or
Sure.
Sort of insight through you?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, these corporates come up with a hypothesis of what they're trying to solve and what they want to learn about, and they'll come to us and describe the problem, and frankly, we then go and do some groundwork to say, right, who are the right people to unpack this for them, and in that process we speak to a lot of experts, and that's something I think we do different to other players in the marketplace. We definitely speak to every expert before we put them on the phone to a client. Mm-hmm. So that's a big thing.
And what are you sort of assessing or judging in those connections with the experts?
It's simple. It's just knowledge, right? Do they know it or not? We probe their knowledge with some of the content that the client gives us.
Yep.
And then we can sense check. You can quickly work out if someone's blagging it or if someone's, they know it by the nature of their answers. So, if it's thorough and it's in depth and it's almost flying over our head, that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. That means the person knows their stuff. If they're giving superficial things, answers that are just, bordering on Googleable, then we're sort of like, oof, I don't think this person's the person.
in the world of AI and every AI tool that's available, are you seeing organizations, whether it be listed equity, private equity investors or corporates, try to source the research and source the expertise and the insight through those channels versus actually getting on the phone or a meeting with a person who's actually been and done it or been and seen it, or been in a carbon situation or been down a mine kind of thing? Like, what's the we could go on all day around having that, having the conversation with someone who's actually been and done it.
You bet, yeah.
But like, how are you?
How's that compared?
How's that comparing
to people using AI as a tool for that?
Yeah, in your world.
Yeah, in my world, absolutely. There's an intersection. So AI, I'm pretty clear on this in my head anyway. Of course, it's going to augment, and of course, it's going to disrupt. The intersection in my head is around, you get insights through us, and we've got tools to help, if you'd probably say collate these insights. And then what does AI do with that? And so there's an opportunity if, for example, there's something sort of that's developed in the industry in the last 5 years, I'd say, which we didn't really see much of before that, is transcripts of the calls. So often, now clients say, hey, we want a transcript. Now, logically, of course, that's great content for an AI tool. And our clients are using that. On their side, we also have a tool we can provide. And what I find interesting about that is that's really seriously, it's digitizing the grey matter that's wandering around day in, day out there. Everyone knows something about everything. That's now getting digitized if someone's doing a call and getting a transcript, and that's getting fed into a tool. Now I say a tool because it's not, strictly speaking, the big LLMs in their purest form. It's sandboxed, ring-fenced type tools. But if you do, we had one client that did 40 calls on a topic. Well, just imagine the granularity. There's 40 different experts speaking on a topic. Just imagine what sort of aggregation and brain that can form if you're interrogating it. And the opportunity there's limitless around, hey, I'm looking at a tangential industry, what applies to this, or how do they intersect, versus, we've done this deal, and the deal team did this deal, and that's great, but hey, the BD guys who are going out running around looking for deals, what's in there for them as well?
I'm interested, you cover, or your client base spans, different markets, as we've touched on, and I'm keen to hear how you serve those different market segments.
Sure.
But also whether you're seeing any sort of acceleration in or change in the nature of what those clients are sort of seeking in terms of expertise. And the reason I'm asking that question, particularly at the moment, is around, we're seeing an uptick in private equity deal flow, and sort of IPO markets are starting to open up again. We're seeing, keen to hear that perspective.
Look, open IPO markets are a good thing. Yep. Yeah, I think we've been waiting a while for that. The narrative, last year was GYG would help that. It sort of didn't. It kind of failed to launch, is what was my read. Look, from a private equity perspective, they've got to deploy capital. They have to do research. Look, that deal flow is great and needed. We're a supporter of the private capital industry. They do go deeper. They start with early stage research and then work out what they like or they don't like, and then they work out what they're going to prosecute pretty hard. There's evolution there around how they can use our services. Logically, it's sort of late stage DD, but then it does creep forward to early stage, and there's even some exec, non-exec placement stuff we can help with, all sorts of stuff like that. And then how does that? Yeah, and then in terms of other client types, we've touched on corporate a little bit, and the listed markets. Yeah, the IPOs. As I said, it's great for that to open up. That helps private equity. That helps just general capital, I think, deployment. And listed clients have to research the companies that they're either going to put into their portfolio or are in their portfolio. So that's something we do a lot of. You know, they've got our you know, clients have channels that they can pursue for that sort of intel, if that's what it is. But then they love coming to us, as a listed clients love coming to us to find experts that can really help solve niche problems. And it's actually something that I find super rewarding when we get a really niche-y question. And there's one or two or three experts that are sort of, you know, non-conflicted, you know, certainly compliant, and
giving your customers the edge.
The edge. Yeah, that's right. And the gushing feedback's fantastic. You know, it motivates us. You know, the team love it. You know, it's generally rewarding in that regard. So it's good.
Yeah, good. I guess you're in one of these sort of fortunate positions where you get to, you know, see all sorts going on in the market. You know, whether it be from through an investor lens, whether it be a corporate who's trying to, you know, solve a quirky problem, macro, micro, you know, etc. We're operating in you know, some interesting times.
That we are.
Globally, whether it be sort of technology disruption, you know, wars, fuel price, etc., etc. What are the sort of one or two key trends or themes that you're currently seeing across that cross section of clients that you work with?
Yeah, you've hit them. Defence, for sure. And then the Middle East energy crisis. Defence is interesting because 10, 15 years ago, you know, you'd sit in a client meeting and someone would say, oh yeah, we can invest in just about anything. And then except, you know, because of ESG, we don't do defence, we don't do gambling, we don't do, you know, alcohol, tobacco. That's changed, right, without a doubt. Like, I mean, the amount of defence sort of requests to understand, you know, the winners and losers of things like AUKUS, but also tech, as you say. I mean, the war in the Ukraine has been phenomenally insightful as to, you know, how things are going to go. And
from a warfare.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, I'm not providing any insight by saying, you know, watching the drone aspect of that is phenomenal. So we've had a lot. We've done a lot around that. And then energy crisis. Look, that's yet to come to its conclusion. Where do we land? How long? You know, life's about timing, right? So we need to know some clarity around that. It'd be great. And then how long does a rebuild of the infrastructure take? That's interesting. And what people are trying to solve now. You know, in times that are uncertain, people do have a desire to go deeper and do more. And so people are trying to understand that. But as someone said the other day, you know, at the moment, you know, the energy crisis in the Middle East is changing. At one point, it was changing by the day. Now it's changing probably by every 48 hours, every 2 days. But you know, and then the commentary there was, well, you're just trying to get people to opine on the news almost. You know, what happens when Trump does this? What happens if Iran does that? Et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and people are trying to learn about certainly as, you know, topics that certainly weren't around.
6 months ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
let alone 5 months ago.
No, that's right. Yeah.
One thing I'm curious to ask is, we're in ADAPTOVATE, we're exactly the same. You know, we're operating in a highly, you know, competitive world, competitive market, and a market that our clients demand, you know, quick responses to challenges, to, you know, what problems they're trying to solve, etc. I'm keen to understand how at Triangulate Knowledge you, if a client, you know, calls you with a sort of genuinely hard question, like what does your process look like to get them in front of or connected with an expert super quick?
Yeah. You know, there's 7 secret herbs and spices, David. I can't tell you everything. No, but obviously we propagate or believe in a fast-paced environment, so we move quickly. I think success on a research topic is getting the right inputs. So if you're not doing that, you can run off in the wrong direction. So we like to
inputs and context from your
into
clients.
us,
Yep.
from the client into us,
Yep.
into our. So we understand it. We know a lot about a lot, but if you go pretty niche on us, we might need to know more, and so we ask for that input. There are genuinely, 2 or 3 things we do that are different and hone in on making sure we do move quickly and move correctly. And then I think it comes back to what I've already talked about. It's making sure. I mean, the thing I find interesting, people are talking about how AI is going to disrupt everything, right? But they're also talking about what's going to be valued. And, certainly for us, we engage with people and we use people to engage with people. And I think the narrative that I'm getting from most of the things I look at is that will be valued. The soft skills of being able to convince David Gumley to do a call on a topic that he knows well, and be available and do it a certain way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, can't be done at the moment anyway, at least by AI, I don't think. I mean, you can sort of have a go at it, and we've all probably received the telemarketing style calls and that sort of stuff that are automated and frankly, I've even received some AI calls, trying to pitch me things that have both failed and proved a little interesting until they've failed again. So the human component, I think, will continue to be valued. But then I'll come back to it. What's augmented and what's disrupted?
Are you seeing more from your clients around practical sort of execution expertise becoming more valuable than, let's say, the sort of traditional investment knowledge?
Look, I'd say it's unchanged, if I'm honest. I mean, I'd anticipate, especially as, if markets do tighten up and I don't know, companies are looking, we can't look past the fact that some large names have let some staff go and they've cited AI and things like that. So, maybe there are that sort of execution, operational, opportunities to say, hey, things, the bottom line can be improved and, this is how you can get some cost out, et cetera, for sure. Yeah. Look, frankly, empirically, I'm not, at the office saying, wow, that's gone through the roof. I think only because you're coming back to it with the uncertainty, the investment markets are also trying to understand stuff too. So maybe it's just everything's rising, as opposed to proportionally out of step.
And the reason I asked that question, ADAPTOVATE, we're in the business of helping organisations execute on strategy, or how do we get sort of rubber on the road kind of thing, which is sort of why I asked that question. Or we're seeing more and more demand for real practical knowledge and advice, and like actually show me how it's done versus telling me what good should look like, sort of thing. I'm just curious if that's sort of translating into your world where speaking to the expert's great, but actually I'd love him to fly in from Houston and actually sit down with me and show me how this
how it all works,
gizmo actually works, or how do I get more out of it. That kind of thing is where I was going.
Yeah, look, that speaks to probably where I think the corporate market needs more of us as well. Like I think there's a place for the consulting firms, and maybe that's being disrupted a little bit. But without a doubt, we've done projects where we fly people across the globe and land them in the middle of nowhere and say, hey, go and implement and fix this. One we did was, I think it was a paper mill, in the deepest, darkest depths of Europe somewhere. And so maybe traditionally that would have been handled by a consulting firm, and then they would have said, well, here's how you do it, and off, away you go. There's still a place for both. Like when I first started in the industry, I thought, oh wow, do I need to navigate this right? Is there a world where I'm running around saying, hey, just use experts, it'll be fine? That's not the only answer there, right? Like consulting firms, they have a place to sort of synthesize yeah, I suppose implement or be around the client perhaps more. You know, I mean, I think, you know, our industry, my industry, can be a little guilty of saying, well, you know, hey, what's the problem? Right, here's the solution, and then we perhaps run off and try and solve the next thing. Whereas, you know, we want to be a real thought partner with our clients, and that is something that we try and differentiate with. And so, look, you know, I see that segment growing for us, but I don't think it's, you know, I think it's a rising tide for everyone probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couple of sort of final questions. What's the, I guess, the weirdest or quirkiest request you've had for expertise or insight that you've come across?
Jeez, I've got to think about that.
Like, I remember one story, and so it may be this, but there was a piece of, and I'm sort of paraphrasing a little bit. There was a piece of kit in the Pilbara somewhere in some mine, you know, millions and millions of dollars of machinery that broke down. There was like one guy in the world who lived in darkest, deepest sort of America somewhere.
I think it was Indonesia actually.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
That had to be flown in to fix this thing because it was, you know, it was costing millions a day of production, etc. Like that kind of thing. Like, what's some of the strangest?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I got my stories confused there. So yeah, in your example, that was actually that was the tank, a hydrocarbon tank full of oxygen, and you know, it was pre-Christmas, and I'm struggling to carry the Christmas presents into the house, you know, and get them all wrapped and everything. Missed call on a Saturday afternoon. You know, eventually checked the voicemail. 10 minutes later, and it was like, you know, it's client X, and we've discovered we've got a little problem that could turn into a bigger problem, and so got straight on the phone to the team, and you know, to watch them rally around it was fantastic. You know, it was a Saturday, but they could see they had a window to grab the US market, so that one was US. And they found the person at the company that had actually designed the equipment, and I am intentionally talking, you know, without specifics there. And you know, I mean, he designed it, so he knew exactly what to do and how to do it. And you just cannot substitute that for anything else. I mean, can you just imagine using AI to sort of help you, and then there's a minor hallucination? Yeah. You don't want that. And then there's been other ones too, like, you know, similar, but hey, you know, we want to open this asset. You know, they're digging stuff out of the ground, and how do we source, you know, some equipment cheaper than usual, because we're not sure the asset's going to necessarily be viable if we just do a massive capex on it. So let's see if we can. And then that was the Indonesian example. So there's been a few. There's a multitude of them, and I do genuinely find them interesting. I mean, you know, like, I know what a, you know, telecommunications subsea cable cross section looks like, and just to see how people like to unpack things and their thinking, and then all the way through to, you know, sitting down with Trump's former press secretary and just getting the brief on how Trump thinks, and it's been totally consistent with what we've seen. Totally consistent. You know, the insight was he's made for media, right? Like, he knows what he's doing. Right? It's not an accident, you know. So, you know, when I see, you know, and he's on his Twitter platform, whatever it's called. What's it called? What's the Trump one? Truth Social or something. He's on that. You know, he's thinking about his voter base. He's thinking about so I find that stuff interesting too, and all that sort of stuff.
Anything you haven't been able to sort of provide your client, like any request that's come in, it's like that's just too hard basket or almost impossible?
Yep. Yeah, a great question, because it's real. The first thing that, you know, I think about sometimes is, you know, you can concoct a project that is almost impossible. I mean, you can, and we've had them. It's like, oh, okay, so, you know, we need to know we need to chat to the guy that's down the mine in China that can talk about, what speed and what temperature, the sort of drill bit breaks at, under certain conditions, and he has to speak English. It's like, well, it's going to be hard. Right? That's going to be pretty hard. And there's, and then there's the
But in that scenario today with AI, like, is there ways of getting around that with translations and
yeah, there is for sure.
Yep.
And also my standard sort of reflection there is, you just have to trade something. And that's what you've suggested. You trade, and you sub in the translation component. One of the things I guess we've built a bit of a rod for our back because we've genuinely done really great calls, and then that's the expectation going forward, that every call will be an 11 out of 10, and sometimes there's not someone available to consult. They are conflicted or they're not compliant, and clients can even sometimes send us a profile, like, saw this guy's like, not compliant, sorry. That's really important. And so the way to handle all of that is so 2 calls that are an 8 out of 10 equal mosaically 10 out of 10, and you get the information you need.
Yeah. Last question. Like I said, you're in a fortunate sort of space where you get to see and hear all sorts going on in the world and the markets, etc. What are your sort of projections or sort of thoughts on what the next, the rest of this year looks like for for Australia?
You put me on the spot there, David. Look, I guess I would anchor to, I remain positive. Maybe time. I mean, this is a moment in time, and the old crystal ball's a little murky. I'd love to see the Middle East everyone's waiting for that, an answer there. And then, as I've already said, once you get to that answer, then how long does the rebuild take? I think I read today in the AFR, there's a couple of Aussie stocks that are pretty well placed to capitalise on spend, I guess there. Going into this, we know what a fuel shock can do, or an energy shock can do to prices, supply chain, and now we've seen that. So certainly, inflation figures, what are we, this week anyway? Weren't good. So that's going to make things hard. So, I guess I'm saying to my team is, stay frosty, nimble, when things get tough gets going a little bit. My sense is hopefully economically it'll be different to last year, but perhaps, just perhaps, it'll be a similar year in general.
Okay.
A bit of a non-answer there.
Yeah, that's okay. And last question. We often
last question.
We like to ask our guests, if there's been a podcast or a book or something that you've read or listened to in the last recently that you would potentially recommend to our audience.
Yeah, I do listen to podcasts, and I chop and change. I don't know why that is. I usually listen to them at the gym or on my commute, and there's a couple I cycle through, and a couple that I pick for different mindsets I'm in. If I want something to sort of relax, then I'll listen to one.
Anything interesting though? You can.
Look, I think Diary of a CEO.
Diary of a CEO.
Yeah, okay, I think he does a good job when you find a topic you're interested in. He does a really good job of teasing it important things, and certainly there's some good topics there around AI and other things that are well worth listening to, just as a way to learn. Yeah,
Charlie, always fascinating and interesting to talk to you, mate. Thank you for your time today, and look forward to welcoming you all back to our next podcast. Thank you.